Well, we ended with this incredible display as in chapter 9 of Leviticus, as they offer the offerings and the Lord comes down and does a supernatural thing, burning the offerings before their eyes. He said if they offer these things, he would show his glory, and he does. Well, it's interesting. Right after that, we get the story of Nadab and Abihu. These are the sons of Aaron. And they go before the Lord and they offer a strange fire. They don't offer it according to what he just prescribed. And, to show the seriousness of this, the fire comes out and consumes them. Now, there is, the Bible really doesn't cover, it doesn't try to hide any kind of aberrations by some of even its heroes. We see David's faults, and we see some of those things happen. And here we see these two, the sons of Aaron, right after Aaron, the priest had just made all the right sacrifices. They come and try to offer, and it's called strange fire, and they're actually burned by it because it's dangerous. It's costly, and there are regulations, there are ways that things are to be done in the kingdom of God for them to be right, and this is one of them. It reminds me of this. It's a great quote, and I think it's from. Yeah, I didn't write it down. I didn't search for it or anything, but there's a great quote, and I think it was C.S. Lewis and talking about Aslan. And they said, they're talking about Aslan the lion, who's supposed to represent Christ. It says, is he safe? And they said, no, he's not safe, but he's good. And there's an aspect. I mean, this is, talking about playing with fire. When you're talking about playing with God and the things that He's commanded, it is playing with fire. We even see it in the New Testament with Ananias and Sapphira as they especially during times of great outpouring, times of great manifestation of the presence of God during the early church there, when it was so pure in what was going on, and they lie about an offering. They try and look good. They try to look like Barnabas did. Barnabas sold something, brought all the proceeds, and they try to look good too, and it doesn't work, and actually they die in front of the congregation. And we see Elymas later on trying to deceive, and Paul actually says he blinds Elymas. So there's playing with the things of God can be quite dangerous. And there's a time, and we don't seem to ever know exactly when it is, when God's mercy in that situation maybe is up, or he's given his opportunities. It says they tested him these 10 times in the wilderness. How did they know after 10 times that was going to be it? Who knew? But there's a place, and it's at this place, they didn't offer the offerings correctly. I mean, that's why there's only been one man in the history of all creation, that's in all Earth's history, that qualified to be the sacrifice for sin, and that is Jesus, because he was perfect. You can't just say, okay, let's do Ed instead. Well, that's not going to work. It just won't work. It has to be according to God's plan. Exactly. So there is a cost. And these sacrifices are given provision to open the door to his gracious offer to his people to be priests, to his people to be a people for his own possession, to be his holy people. To reject this provision, the New Testament talks about it in Hebrews 10:29, is to trample underfoot the Son of God, regarding the blood as unclean. It's insulting the Spirit of grace. Leaving that one that does such things deserving of severe punishment, it says, even in the New Testament. In fact, it would be good after you read through Leviticus that you go to Hebrews and read Hebrews, because Hebrews takes all these ideas of the sacrifice and it puts them in the New Testament context with the offering of Jesus. So in Leviticus, we see spelled out for us all of these laws. There's moral laws, there's civil laws, sanitary laws, ceremonial laws, religious laws. And so to put those in context, I would say read all of that and then go to Hebrews. But we're going to highlight a couple of different things here at this point and just kind of summarize. And I'll spend a lot more time when we get to Leviticus 23. But in Leviticus 16, it describes for us there the Law of Atonement. And here is a chapter where it talks about specifically that, and in fact, this designates what's later called the Day of Atonement. It happens once a year. But this is how you're to enter in to God's presence. Now we've seen God gives the requirement for what sacrifices to bring so he can show his glory. Nadab and Abihu, they go and they do not according to that and are consumed. So then we get to chapter 16, and it says there, now the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron, when they had approached the presence of the Lord and died. And the Lord said to Moses, tell your brother Aaron that he shall not enter at any time into the holy place inside the veil before the mercy seat, which is on the ark, lest he die. So he says, you can't just wander in there any time. You don't just do it any old time. It says, for I will appear in the cloud over the mercy seat. The Lord's actual presence is there, and in his presence, the idea is God's presence requires purity. There has to be a covering. There has to be an atonement for our sin to make us pure so we can actually abide in his presence. Then in verse 3 in chapter 16 it says, Aaron shall enter the holy place with a bull for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering. He shall put on the holy linen tunic, and the linen undergarment shall be next to his body, and he shall be girded with the linen sash and attired with linen turban. These are holy garments. Then he shall bathe his body in water and put them on. So there's very specific requirements as to how he's supposed to do this. In fact, in one place when it talks about putting on all the linen, it says, and he shall not sweat. And I'm thinking, man, just knowing that I can't sweat, I would sweat. I mean, how do you not sweat in that situation? But anyway, it's talking about really being clean, the clean and pure. Verse 5, and he shall take from the congregation of the two sons of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering. So here we got another some specifics talked about what's happening on the Day of Atonement. Here's the Law of Atonement. In verse 9, that chapter says, then Aaron shall offer the goat on which the lot for the Lord fell and make it a sin offering. So he takes the 2 goats, he casts the lot, and one of the lot falls. That goat is chosen for an offering, okay? That goat is offered before the Lord. But the goat on which, verse 10, the lot for the scapegoat fell, shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement upon it and to send it into the wilderness as the scapegoat. Here's the concept of scapegoat, and I think you've heard, we hear it even in our society today. It's even used still. It says he's a scapegoat for this guy, and what it means is they take the blame for you. They take the blame for whoever. The guilt of somebody else is put upon them. And what we have here at the Day of Atonement, this time of atonement, when once a year he can enter into this holy place with the blood of these goats and a bull. And it says, so he casts a lot. 1 goat is chosen for sacrifice. And that goat's blood will be used to put on the mercy seat and other places before the altar and on the mercy seat. And the other goat is going to be designated as a scapegoat. And we'll read in just a bit what happens to him. But in verse 13 it says, and he shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, that the cloud of incense may cover the mercy seat that is on the ark of the testimony, lest he die. So we see 2 things that he's warned about dying here when he goes into the Holy of Holies. One is he's got to have the blood of pure animals that are without defect. And the second is that the mercy seat needs to be covered with incense. And the incense is, a picture in the scriptures throughout of prayers. I mean, it's talked about in Revelation, particularly in that way. But so it's like he's to enter in, not just casual. You don't just walk up and say, hey, you want to go see the holy place today? And it doesn't work like that. There's a time, there's a way, there's a procedure that has to take place. Otherwise, it says, you'll die. So, I mean, it's dangerous. Is he safe? No, he's not safe. But he's good. And so we get to verse 20, and it talks here about the scapegoat. What happens with this scapegoat? When he finishes atoning for the holy place, there's talk about what's done with the blood and where it's placed and put upon the mercy seat and in front of the altar, and there's got to be the incense. So when he finishes atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall offer the live goat. Then Aaron shall lay both of his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities of the son of Israel and all their transgressions in regard of their sins, and he shall lay them on the head of the goat and send it away into the wilderness by the hand of man who stands in readiness. And the goat shall bear on itself all their iniquities to a solitary land, and he shall release the goat in the wilderness. So here we have 2 goats that happens. One is offered as a blood offering for atonement. The other one, the scapegoat, they take the goat, Aaron's laid both hands on it, pray the sins of Israel, on all the iniquities, the moral impurities, the moral, fault, defect, and then you pray all of that upon this goat, and you send the goat into the wilderness. And the goat is just left out in the wilderness to wander. Well, it kind of gives us a picture of two things that happen that God really desires in his redemption of mankind. Is one, that our sins be covered, to be atoned for. But the second is that we get sin out of the camp. And we look at those probably in the New Testament, if we'll get there, where we talk about those in terms of two terms, probably sum those up. One is justification. That would be our atonement, the blood covering the sin. The other would be sanctification, getting the sin out of camp. Getting the sin so we don't continue to live in sin, but sin is imparted upon this goat that's sent out into the wilderness just to roam and take the sin out of the camp.